Hello and welcome to Good Enough Chats. My name's Dan Bauscher and I am the host of today's podcast. And I am joined by Ben. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, just got back from a lovely trip to Amsterdam, so I'm good.
Ooh, yes, a relaxing place to be. We'll say no more. Not that I'm implying anything, uh, but it's lovely to have you on the show today, Ben.
Yeah, thank you.
Would you mind, for the benefit of our audience, introducing yourself? Give us your full name, where you're from, where you live, because I know those two things are different. What you do for a living, home life, and because this is my new standardized question for everybody at the start of these conversations, your favorite flavor of crisps.
Of course. So, firstly, thank you very much indeed for having me. My name is Ben Howard. I am originally from England, the east of England, a little market town called Bury St Edmunds. I now live in France, in a town about an hour south of Paris called Chartres. Or if you're going to pronounce it in an English way, you'd probably say Chartres. I'm now an online fitness and lifestyle coach. So I help people with fat loss, muscle building, generally getting themselves in much, much better shape. But I used to work in finance. So I spent a long, long time, 15 years of my life as an accountant before making the decision that that was no longer for me, which I'm sure we will get a little bit deeper into as we go on.
Yeah.
I live at home with my wife, Lara, and our 19-month-old son, Louis. And favorite flavor of crisps is a good question because I don't really eat them. But if I go back many, many years to when I did, and given that France isn't the best when it comes to crisps,
It's not. We were discussing that off camera, weren't we?
we were. It's the choice is improving, and I have to take my wife's word for that because she's a bit more partial to a crisp than me. But do you remember the roast beef and mustard Brannigans that would just burn your tongue?
Ben, we are obviously twins made from the same egg here. That was my answer. I was asked this question on the first episode of this
No way.
season, and that is exactly what I said.
The
Brannigan.
best, right? Brannigan, yeah, the roast beef and mustard ones. The salt and vinegar also completely tore your tongue to shreds, but the roast beef and mustard.
Did they have, am I misremembering this? Did they have a ham and piccalilli flavour as well? I think they might have done.
Maybe
Or a ham and pickle.
maybe a special edition. Yeah.
Yeah. They were substantial crisps.
Yeah, like a proper thick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have to launch the campaign to bring Brannigan's back again.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can do that through like vocal support. You don't actually have to eat them, but it's important for me that they do come back, Ben.
I'll back the campaign, don't worry.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
So, I think it's important. I mean, some people are going to be listening to this who will not have heard one of these episodes before. So, for the benefit of those people specifically, and anybody that's hearing an episode of Good Enough Chats for the first time, these conversations are unscripted. This content that you're hearing or watching now is going to be unedited, bar sticking the logos on the front and the back of it. But they are based around the same 5 questions every time. And that's important because it means that Ben knows what questions are coming. And Ben, like every other guest that comes onto the show, can decide how he's going to answer those questions. And he can also decide how much he wants to prepare himself to answer those questions. Because obviously what we're talking about today is lived experiences of mental health. And that's not easy by definition. So it's really important for me, as the person who's asking Ben to come onto this platform, that Ben feels that he is in control of the conversation at all times, right? So he knows those 5 questions. That gives us a structure. Inevitably, from the answers that Ben gives, we'll go off on tangents at various different points in time. But if we stray into territory that Ben's not comfortable talking about, all he's got to do is say, I'm not really comfortable with that. And we'll go straight back into the structure of the 5 questions. So without further ado, Ben, let's just jump straight into that first question. And that is, why are you here today sharing your lived experiences of mental health?
I think I've become more and more aware of maybe my own issues that I perhaps hadn't accepted or didn't really know exactly what they were, or just didn't really know how to speak about them. And I've spent a decent bit of time doing some more internal work and understanding what those things are and how they've impacted me. And I just think it's important to have platforms such as this that enable us to talk about stuff, because men, probably more so than women, aren't great at talking about these things. But we all have issues, we all have problems. And I think just knowing that not everyone, everyone has something, like you're not alone. There are other people that have probably got very similar experiences. And just, I think to know that sometimes helps almost come to terms with them. And maybe, even if one other person was to hear what I'm going to say or what any of your guests have to say and is then prepared to talk or seek help or whatever they might need for their situation, that's a huge win.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it. That's the sort of the driving force behind this. I'm not an expert in this. You're not an expert in this. But that's why it's important that we give people a chance to hear what people have been through. Because you're right. I know that when I hear people who I feel like I can relate to talking about stuff, I'm much more likely to, it's going to prick my ears up, and I'm much more likely to actually absorb some of that and then act on it as
Hmm.
well. So I'm always forever grateful when someone does come forward to share their story on this platform. And you're quite right. The difference it needs to make is, does one person hear this and as a consequence of that start to follow down a positive path to go and help themselves?
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the most important KPI that I could ever hope for from one of these conversations. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you coming forward. Next question is, you've sort of alluded to it slightly, but how's your last week been?
It's been a really, really nice week, actually. In some ways, some highs and lows. So we've had my parents staying with us for a couple of weeks. They went home on Tuesday. We don't get to see them all that often, living in a different country. It's like 2 or 3 times a year usually. So it's always amazing to have them, always amazing to see them, for Louis, our son, to get to spend a decent bit of time with grandma and granddad, and
Yeah.
all the good stuff that goes with that. We've had Amsterdam. Lara surprised me with a trip to an early 40th birthday present. My 40th is in a couple of weeks' time. So an early trip to Amsterdam, which was really nice to get away for a couple of weeks, couple of nights.
A couple of weeks, that's a Freudian slip.
Couple of nights in Amsterdam, where it was just like, it's strange how much, again, any parent is probably going to relate to this, but it's strange how much you forget that you were a couple first before children came along, because when kids arrive, you just become parents and a family. So being able to actually have some time just to talk together and be able to just get up and go for a walk and not have to think we need a million things packed in a bag and when's he going to nap and all of these other things that go with young children. And then I guess the lows are of it, like my mum and dad going home again. It's, you get used to them being around and it's really, really nice to have them. And then all of a sudden it comes to a bit of an end. And I always get that little bit of just a sad sort of feeling, like I know I'm going to see them in another few months' time, but it's that little bit of time apart that I probably used to take for granted, that I live just down the road from them, and I probably see more of them now than when I live just down the road from them. But knowing that they were there, I think, and when the situation's as it is, it can cause a little bit of a temporary low moment.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I get that. I get that. It's been we were saying off camera, just to throw my own personal challenges in. You may have seen, if you're watching this, that I was just pouring from a large vat of coffee. Ben, for anyone listening, not viewing this, Ben is bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and drinking a large bottle of water, and I am consuming an entire vat of coffee at the moment.
I was up at 5 this morning at the gym, so I'm starting to get to that point where, yeah.
Oh, wow. I think I just about got to sleep at 5 this morning. It's a restless dog challenge for me, though. Obviously, I'm super fit and healthy. That's not why I'm tired. It's the bloody dog. Um, right. Okay. So that sort of second question about the last week, I think is a really important bit of context to set for people who are starting to realize that they may be struggling with their mental health, because you and I both know that it's not a linear journey, right? And there are going to be times when you feel good and times where you can feel bloody awful. And understanding that there is no silver bullet for happiness, as somebody who's struggling with their mental health, is really, really important context, I think, for people to understand, because there will be peaks and troughs on that journey back. But let's turn to the journey and how that's panned out for you, Ben. So I always say to people, when talking about how your relationship with your mental health has evolved, you can start the answer to this wherever you want to. If you can trace this back to childhood, or if this is something that you've kind of got your head around quite recently, it's down to you to decide where you start with this. But how has your awareness and your relationship with your mental health, mental fitness evolved?
I would say I've probably been through different periods with it. So there's been points in my life where I've felt very good and comfortable and confident in who I am. And I think a lot of what I've come to realize is that I've had various different moments in my life where I've probably had elements of just, I guess, like identity crisis is probably the right way to phrase it. Like, various things have happened throughout my life that have meant quite big changes have happened in my life. And each time that relatively big thing has happened, I've not necessarily come to terms with it quickly, if at all, or understood exactly what it was that I was going through. And I can probably take that all the way back to like my childhood years. I was a very good footballer from a very young age. I was signed to Ipswich Town Football Club from the age of 10. And I very much saw my path at that point in time. I was going to be a professional footballer. My whole life was just revolved around football. Anytime I could have a ball at my feet, that's what I did. All of my friendships were based around football. And that was the path and the journey that I very, very much thought I was going to go down. And then something happened at the point that I think I was 12 years old. And at that point in time, Ipswich Football Club, and I think a lot of professional clubs do this, they will, before that, you can play Sunday league football, you can play school football, and then you also have training with the professional club. So the professional club is just a bit like an add-on, really, at that point. You get to an age, and I'm pretty sure it was 12 years old, and the professional football club essentially tell you, we no longer want you playing Sunday league football. They can't stop you playing for the school because there's a tie-in with like education and stuff, but they can say, we don't want you playing Sunday league football. like there's too great a risk of injury. You know, if we're buying into you as a player, we want it to be us and only us. And at that point in time, a few things happened. My two best friends at the time, like, completely flipped on me. It was, you know, they were kids that I went to school with. We played Sunday league football together, and all of a sudden, I was then having to stop that Sunday league football to pursue a path that was where I wanted to go. It was what was going to be considered like success in my life. But because these two kids couldn't wrap their heads around the fact maybe that it was me that was going down that path. It wasn't them, like whether they were like jealousy or whatever it was, but it just completely flipped that situation to the point where there was name calling, like they were trying to turn everyone against me. Like I was this awful person for pursuing the dream that I had, and the dream that all of us had as those kids. Everyone wanted to be a professional footballer. And so it gave me this real, just, I think, like a really negative view of success, because my potential success actually led to me being really, really unhappy. You know, my best friends at the time turned on me so much so that I didn't want to go to school and stuff because I didn't really want to be bumping into them. I didn't want to deal with all the name calling. I ended up not really doing very well at Ipswich, and they let me go the following year because it was so unenjoyable as a process that I wasn't really myself when I was playing football for them. Like I was almost shying away from allowing my ability to come out because I guess I'd built up in my head that this successful path I was going down was in some way a negative thing because of what I'd lost in the process. And I think that was the first sort of identity crisis kind of moment that I can look back on and appreciate now. At the time, I don't think I really understood what was going on. I just didn't have the emotional intelligence or maturity to understand it. It was just, it happened and it was what it was. And then I probably the next time I experienced any kind of crisis of identity was, I think there was probably a point around like 17, 18 where I got a serious injury. I ruptured my ACL, and that basically put pay to any aspirations of ever playing football again. Partly because the NHS took so long to repair it, but the NHS is a conversation we can leave for another time. And so I then went through this, I guess, another little, football had always been my thing. And then all of a sudden that whole thing was gone. So what am I now going to do? And I ended up, I guess, like falling into accounting in some ways. Like I knew I didn't want to go to university. I knew I didn't want to start my life in debt. A friend of mine at the time who was a year above me at school had just gone into accountancy the year before, had a bit of a chat with him, and he had a chat with his work, and I sort of ended up like getting an interview a little bit through him mentioning my name, and I started that apprenticeship, and I spent the next 14, 15 years working my way up the ranks as an accountant, finance professional. And I probably then reached a point again, like probably around about 30 years old, maybe. I've been in that profession 12 years by that point. And I started to just, the more success I was getting within my career, it wasn't translating to like personal happiness. So at work, I was getting promoted, I was getting paid more money, I was getting these new roles and these new positions, but I wasn't happy in myself, you know, like in my relationships or any of that stuff. And so again, I think I had this almost like secondary exposure to success being a bad thing. And so that was starting to build up this negative image around success, I think. And then, things changed a little bit. I left the finance world. I started doing what I'm doing now. I met Lara through my former finance world. Part of that job at the time meant that I did a little bit of like a secondment thing to our Paris office, which is where Lara worked and still works. Happened to be seconded into her team. She was one of very few other English people. So in an office full of French speakers where I didn't speak a word, we just had that in common straight away. And it was just very easy to converse. And then a few months later, we actually got chatting through LinkedIn, that very well-known dating platform. Quickly switched over to WhatsApp, and I went out a few months later, and our relationship started relatively quickly. We spent the first 3 or 4 years in different countries, and then I made the move to France in 2019. And then our relationship was moving forward. We got married, and then we wanted to start a family. And so we were doing what we needed to do to attempt to start a family, and nothing was happening and nothing was working. So we went and got tests done. I went and had my test done, and the result came back and said 0 sperm in my sample. And that was probably the biggest knock to my confidence that I have ever experienced. Like that one thing that makes men and allows us to procreate and be the dad that we want to be, I didn't have. And I just fell apart a little bit. I didn't know how to deal with that at all. And then I had to go back and have a second test to just confirm that the results of the first test were correct, which they were, which was like another kick in the balls, so to speak. This reconfirmation that you don't have what it takes to be a father. And then we had to start having conversations with fertility specialists. And so, we're doing this in France, a language that I still wasn't completely familiar with. We did manage to find an English speaking specialist, so that was a big help. And I remember the very first consultation we had with him, he's got my results in front of him, and he's looking at those, and he's saying we don't know what the situation is exactly, so there's going to be various other tests that you're going to have to go through. You might have sperm. We don't know. We'll need to investigate that further. But if that isn't the case, I need you right now to start thinking about sperm donors and all of these other things. And all of a sudden, like, what's going through my head is, can I ever be an actual dad? Like, can I physically, is there going to be any of my DNA in any children that we might decide to have? And that just, again, like, completely sent me crazy. I just didn't really know what to make of that. And, Lara and I were sort of talking, and, she was saying, well, from her point of view, she'd probably be more okay with it. And, there would still be like half of us within this child because it would be her egg. But I could not wrap my head around not having me in that child. As it turned out, it was just that I've got a couple of different birth defects that meant essentially the 2 tubes that would ordinarily come out of each testicle that would allow sperm to be released. One of them I was born without. So one side doesn't have a tube and the other side is blocked. So I produce sperm. It just had no way of getting out of my body. So fortunately, and through the wonders of modern science, we've been able to have a child through the process of IVF, where they've extracted egg, extracted sperm. They've basically created an embryo outside of the womb, and then that was implanted. A very weird way to conceive a child, because again, there's none of the fun stuff, if you like, that most people would think about, the joys of going through the process of reproduction. For us, it was very sterile, and it involved lots of operations and hormone injections and all of these things. And so there's been like various different points where I think I've struggled with who I am and sort of coming to terms with these different things that ultimately, like, I think I'm quite good at now appreciating that everything does happen for a reason. And, you know, all of those things that have happened have led me to where I am today and who I am today. And I'm very proud and grateful of all of those things. But in the moment, I really, really struggled.
And yeah, I can only imagine.
Covered like 30 years of my life there. But
You
yeah.
have. I was going to stop and ask you a question earlier, and I'm really glad I didn't actually. So again, something else that I probably should have clarified to listeners earlier on is I don't know what Ben's going to say when he's coming onto this. I deliberately don't ask any of the guests what their background, their story is, because I want my reaction to be natural, not contrived. So I had no idea that this was a key part of Ben's story. It also affords me, hopefully, a little bit more latitude to ask dumb questions in a clumsy way because they're not pre-prepared. And I think the first thing that I wanted to ask was, what sort of time frame was there between you realizing or being told that there was a problem and you actually seeing the arrival of Louis?
It's quite, I mean, it's a fairly long process. I mean, we'd been trying naturally probably for 12, 15, 18 months. So if you, I guess the time frame from being in the right mind space, or however you want to refer to it, to start a family to Louis actually arriving was probably about 3 years.
Right.
After that initial 12, 15, 18 months, like from the point of that first test, I think the second test was maybe like a month later. We then had a consultation with the IVF specialist maybe 2 to 4 weeks after that. And then we began the process. So there's something else to throw into the mix. So we've been married twice. So legally we got married during COVID, and we were supposed to have that same year, like the big celebratory part of it. In France, you legally have to get married at your local town hall, and then how you want to celebrate is up to you. We had to postpone the celebratory part for 2 years because of the whole COVID situation. And we ended up starting like the IVF process. So like the very first injection that Lara had to have hormonally was the day before we had our celebratory wedding. So that was like another layer that we added in. You know, we've got all of this stuff on our mind. And I think from the point of that first injection that she would have had, because it's a tough process. Like there's lots of injections, there's egg retrieval, there's scans like every 48 hours to make sure things are growing and developing, even at like the egg retrieval stage, all of this stuff that's going on. I've always referred to it as almost feeling like we were pregnant for about 2 years,
Mm.
because the process begins way, way, way before that egg is physically deposited into Lara. And it probably was like a year's worth of injections, egg retrievals. We had to go through that process twice. I then had to go in for my operation to have my side removed. It all has to be tested. They then have to do the process of actually like binding the things together. Not everything is going to be successful. So every time you go from like X many eggs, there's only so many of them become viable. You get to the point where they've all been fertilized. Again, only so many of them become available. So you could start, a situation where, there might be, I don't know, 10, 15 eggs that have been retrieved. Maybe half of them actually become viable for the process. So there's 7 or 8. And then of those 7 or 8, we managed to get 3 to what they call 5-day embryo stage. And it's at that stage that they're considered ready to be implanted. We were also very, very fortunate and lucky that it worked for us at the first time of trying. And again, that's something but we're both extremely grateful for, because we know plenty of people who that absolutely isn't the case for. They've tried time and time and time again and never ever get to the point where it is successful. So from that point of view, incredibly grateful to be in the position we are, to have an amazing little boy. Like it really is a miracle that he's here. But yeah, I always describe it as being pregnant for about 2 years.
Mm. Wow. I, thinking back to our kids, I think for our first, I think we were trying for about 18 months. And I at the time, I'm prone to catastrophization. So I was thinking, oh my God, what if we can't? What if
Yeah.
we can't? And then we did eventually. So I'm not trying to draw any comparison with the experience that you've been through, but I have some sense of the anxiety, I guess, that induces in you when you just like, is this going to happen?
Yeah. Lara was probably the one who was more like worried about something being wrong. Like I don't know, again, maybe it was like a bit of a male chauvinistic thing, but I'm like, I'm fit, I'm healthy, I regularly exercise, I eat well, I don't drink, I don't smoke. Everything about the way that I live my life is to be as fit and healthy as possible. So it can't possibly be me, right? Like it can't be me. Why would anything be wrong with me? Like I live this amazing lifestyle that means I'm doing everything right. And so I think I probably didn't want to accept it, because why would you want to accept that something was wrong? And it did really take Lara to almost force me in many ways to go and get tested, because it's far easier for me to go and get tested as well. Like the process a woman has to go through is far more complicated and involved. For me, I just have to go and do what I need to do in a cup, and it gets sent away and gets tested. And, even once I'd gone and done that, there probably still wasn't like a particular worry in my head that the problem was going to be on my side. In some ways, that possibly made it worse when that result came through, because I probably detached myself so much from the possibility that it could be me. Suddenly that letter comes through the post, or how it might probably online these days. Actually, you get a message, open this link, and to read that result was like a crushing blow. It was all of a sudden I've not even entertained the possibility of this. And now I've got to face the very real fact that I am the problem. So, and, Lara's been amazing through the whole thing, like, encouraging me to talk about stuff, and just being amazing as a person to be there with me through everything. And like the whole journey we completely shared together. Like I was at every single scan, every single thing. We wanted to do the whole thing together, but it wasn't easy. And I think the other thing that it like really got me thinking about was, and I understand why, but like the school sex education system is very much designed to like avoid teenage pregnancy. And I completely get that. But I think that also potentially made it a bit worse, because you're at school, you're essentially told like, you put that in there, pregnant.
Yeah.
Like, don't even entertain it without protection. You will get pregnant It is going to happen. That's how easy it is. And so that's almost what you carry into adulthood. It's that thought that, okay, like, you know, at the point that we decide that this is what we want, we just go for it and it happens. And it doesn't for a huge number of people. It really, really isn't an easy thing to do. Like, there's a very small little window where pregnancy can even happen. Like, a woman has to be at a very specific stage of her cycle. They don't tell you that at school. So, and like I said, I get it. I understand why. Like, they don't want people running around getting pregnant at 15, 16 years old. Of course, it's the right thing to do. But maybe a bit later in life, maybe there's something that should happen in terms of education. Maybe that is up to parents to have those conversations with their own kids. But if you've never experienced it, if you were one of the fortunate people that was able to just have sex and get pregnant, you don't know any different. Like, you're reinforcing what's been taught at school. So yeah, like I say, there's various different things I think that went through my mind at that point, but the biggest of them was, I think, just this sense that I was in some way less of a man because there was this issue.
Did you ever seek professional help from a counsellor or a psychotherapist at any point?
I considered it. It wasn't something that was immediately offered. And again, maybe that's something else that should also change. I think even just to have somebody say, because it's a massive thing to hear, to go through, and to almost just be expected to get on with it, which is really what we were told to do. It was like, it was almost a bit more, you know, procedural and factual. Like, okay, so the next steps, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. But at no point was anyone saying, are you okay with it? You know, like, have you mentally come to terms with it? Like, do you understand how hard this next step's going to be, and that it still might not be successful? Like, have you actually taken the time to process that in your own mind?
Can I ask, was there, so it wasn't offered, but was there ever any at least acknowledgement that it must be tough? Was there any sort of consistency to that sort of the dynamic of the conversation that you were having with the medical professionals?
I think I think there probably was. So and I don't know, and I don't want to assume, but I think that the medical professional that we used probably had children via the IVF process themselves.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that's what then led them down that particular specialism, because their own issues meant that they wanted to in some way give back. I don't know that for sure. As I say, I'm making an assumption because he was a really, really nice guy who did care, but his field of expertise wasn't the psychological side. You know, his was very much the physical side. So there probably was maybe I don't know, like an unspoken understanding that it isn't an easy thing to go through, but there wasn't really an actual verbal conversation had. No.
That speaks volumes in itself, doesn't it? I mean, I've spoken to as a guy from one of the earlier episodes, John Aspinox, and he part of his kind of lived experience of mental health was the postnatal support, or the lack of postnatal support, because his wife, the birth of their first child was incredibly traumatic, and rightly she was given a lot of focus and support, but he said he was basically told to go out and play golf, and that was his solution. And the legacy of that was that when they had the second child, and John, if you're listening to this, please do correct me if I'm misrepresenting this, he went into that just in a state of high anxiety because of what had happened the first time round.
Yeah.
And again, the support wasn't there.
Mm.
It was the perinatal experience for him was disturbing, to
Yeah.
say the least.
Yeah.
But there's a parallel there where I wonder if the system is more geared up for the woman's needs, understandably,
Mhm.
and the men's needs are just kind of softly spoken or not spoken at all.
Yeah, and we had a similar kind of experience. So the birth was pretty traumatic for Lara. Louis arrived into the world, and very, very quickly I was like ushered off with him into a separate room while she stayed there, and I didn't really know what was going on. And so I was sat having, the skin on skin contact with our son, and all I could see in the distance were like medics running into the room that I've just come out of.
Wow.
So at this point, had absolutely no idea what was going on. Like, I don't know if that's normal or what's going on. And I don't know how much time passed because you're just in a complete daze at that stage. But I want to say like a couple of hours went by where I was just sat with our son, and I had no idea what was going on with my wife, no idea whatsoever. And then a doctor eventually came in and just said, yeah, and he was explaining this to me in French, and I'm absolutely exhausted, trying to comprehend what's going on. Managed to sort of understand enough to say that she'd bled a lot, and they needed to make sure that they were stopping the bleeding and doing what they needed to do to make sure that she was okay. I mean, as a result of that, we ended up being in hospital for a week. France is better at these things anyway. So there's almost an expectation in France that you would stay in hospital for, I think, at least 3 days, like 2 nights, 3 days, to get some kind of support and relief. I know in the UK, quite commonly, if it's been a fairly easy birth, you're literally sent home the same day. But we were there for a week in the middle of a 40 plus degree heat wave,
Oh,
threw us in a little hospital room, me dashing backwards and forwards to work the entire time because I'm self-employed and I can't take time off, even though my clients are amazing and they would have understood in that moment if I said, look, I can't do check-ins this week. My own like desire to do what I do and give 100% meant that I was dashing backwards and forwards. Needed 2 blood transfusions across that week. So I was largely having to do a lot for our son because she needed the time to recover. Um, and again, none of that was really, at no point did anyone really just say to me, how are you doing?
yeah.
I was just completely on autopilot, like I wasn't sleeping well. I mean, I'm sleeping on like a horrible little hospital chair type thing that I shouldn't really be there anyway. Like the hospital rules really would have said that I should have gone home. I think in reality, they were probably quite glad I was there because I was able to support stuff that didn't mean that they had to constantly do things. But I think strictly speaking, I shouldn't have been there. But yeah, it wasn't a particularly nice experience for
No.
the whole thing. And yeah, that's just how it was. And even, like once we've been through that, I don't think anyone has ever really, I mean, Lara's obviously made sure that I'm all right, but I don't know that anyone else has really sort of said to me, how are you? Like, how was that experience? How are you feeling? And it probably did, again, it probably did impact me more than I realized. Cause in that moment, I don't know, I described it to someone else on another podcast. I felt like I had to be so much everything to everyone that I was probably barely being anything to anyone,
Yeah.
is I was just trying to completely give myself in so many different places. I probably wasn't bonding with Louis as well as I should or could have done, because my mind's on other things. Like, I probably wasn't necessarily being as like mindful or doting on Lara as I could or should have been, because I was conscious of other things. Yeah, it's a really, really difficult thing. And like, again, where you probably not really told about any of these things. Like, it's always spoken about the birth process as just being straightforward and simple, and this is how it's going to go. But when it isn't that, and again, percentage wise, I would think there's a hell of a lot of people that don't have simple, straightforward births. You're not prepared for it.
Mm.
Um, and again, I do understand it to some extent, because you don't want to be going to like the, the prenatal classes or whatever, and they're just telling you horror story after horror story. Of course, I get that, because that's just going to build your worry and stuff. But I don't know. I get that there's probably some way of having some kind of conversation that doesn't completely strike the fear of God into you, but allows you to at least in some way prepare for the possibility that it isn't going to be simple.
I feel like this is a this is the kind of thing that is more a societal challenge, isn't it?
Mm,
It's the expectations that are set around perfectly natural processes that take place that are, when you described how sex education's taught in schools earlier, it's the same thing again, isn't it? Try to find a way to get teenage boys to engage with this sensibly so that they understand what could happen
hmm
during the time that their first kid is born, for example.
mm,
Because it's right, you're right. You only really know when you've been through it, right? There's only so many times that someone can tell you something before you actually experience it for yourself, right?
yeah,
But I think you're right. There isn't enough of a consistent and clear message that's being given to boys around this, but also the point around how you feel when you're stuck in the middle of all of this and you're trying to process, which is this incredibly overwhelming set of circumstances that you find yourself right in the middle of. That's overwhelming.
yeah.
I mean, the next question is about the kind of the key kind of moments that you've experienced where you've realized I need to stop doing that, or I need to start doing more of that will help you with your kind of your broader mental well-being. But before I go into that, have you ever spoken to somebody since in a professional capacity about this to help
Oh,
you process it?
so in so I've recently, at the start of this year, I've started working with a life coach. So that's probably been my first step into any kind of direct external help from, I guess, more of a psychological perspective. There have been various moments where I have thought about it, and looking back, probably should have sought help much, much sooner. But I think I probably also carried with myself that little bit of male stigma that I shouldn't do that. I should be able to cope with these things myself. I should man up, for want of a better phrase, because that strong, silent male figure is also what I experienced with my own dad, and that's like the learned trait that I'm, I guess, trying to process to some degree and alter in a way my own outlook and approach to the way that I'm being a father and a husband and whatever else I'm being. But it's only been very, very recent. other than, talking to Lara or friends, like I had those conversations, but never in a professional capacity.
I'm not telling you to do it. But the way that you talk about it very eloquently, but I don't think it would do you any harm whatsoever to have some conversations around that, because it's going to help you to work out. Well, it's going to help you to kind of unpick some stuff.
Yeah.
In the longer term, and just because it might not be front of mind right now, doesn't mean that it won't be sort of eating away back here at some point. But as somebody who has done an awful lot of sort of psychotherapy stuff, it is incredibly helpful. I found it incredibly helpful, and it sort of picked away at things that were just not even on my radar at all, that have been really game changing in the long term. But to have kind of been through that level of trauma, both in the build up to and during the birth, yeah, it would not be a bad thing.
Yeah.
To have those conversations, and just to give yourself a chance to kind of process it in a slightly different way. Let's turn to those those light bulb moments. I mean, there was a way back in the conversation, I had a question about the relationships with the mates that decided to sort of turn nasty on you. Do you have anything to do with those people now? Have you gone back and spoken to them at all?
So one of them, no. So there were two. One of them I have had absolutely nothing to do with. So we would have continued to go to the same schools for the next 4 or 5 years, but very different friendship circles. Didn't really have anything to do with one another at all. A same situation with the other one, but the other one, quite randomly in some ways, actually reached out to me because of what I now do. So he was looking to get in better physical shape, improve his health, improve his fitness. And he sent me a message on Instagram, I think, like off the back of a post, a story, whatever it was. Didn't really sort of acknowledge anything that had happened 25, 30 years ago. But I've I think I've come to terms with it in my own head, in the sense that I can understand and appreciate why everything happens now. Like, I've got to the point of having done a lot of work around gratitude and appreciation. I don't really feel anything towards those people in a negative sense, because if that situation hadn't happened, my life wouldn't have developed to where it is now. So all of those things that happen in our past lead us to where we are, who we are, etc. And if I hadn't have experienced those things, my life would be very different. That's not to say that it'd be better or worse, but it just wouldn't be what it is right now.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of, it wasn't really acknowledged as part of the conversation. I was just very happy to offer him some general advice around health and fitness, and we had a little bit of backwards and forwards on that. And yeah, that was as far as that conversation went. And that was a few years ago now.
It's interesting. I think you're a bigger man than I am. I think I would, where I am now, psychologically, I think if something like that manifested itself, I think I would probably say, "Do you remember this?" Just not in a finger pointing way, but just I think it would be important to let that person know what that did to you at the time, or sorry, to me at the time if I were in that
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
I think it might be helpful for them and it might be helpful for me to do that. But equally, I'm fully on board for, let bygones be bygones. You can do it without it being in anger.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Yeah.
But that's not for me to tell you what to do. That's just me. I guess I'm projecting, Ben, at this stage.
No, maybe if that conversation had have happened in person, maybe it'd be different. I
Yeah.
do think the nature of it being written text through a social media platform in a very specific context to him wanting a bit of advice about getting fitter, healthier, and that's what I do now. I don't know, it didn't really feel like the right way to have that
No.
conversation either. Whereas if we'd have bumped into one another, you know, I think he still lives back where, we used to live. If I was there visiting people, bumped into him in the street and we went and grabbed a coffee or something, like maybe that conversation would have happened and, there'd have been a bit of an understanding that, you were a bit of a dickhead back in the day and
Mm.
he would probably accept that fact. And we're now both, nearly 40 years old and with kids and stuff. And you can move past it because it was at a very, very different point in our lives. But yeah, in that moment, it just didn't really feel like an appropriate way to have a conversation if I wanted to have it at all.
Check you out being the responsible adults. Well, fair play to you. So let's go to question 4, which is the kind of the light bulb moment. So again, just to kind of recap on what I was saying before, these are those really sort of tangible moments that stick out in your head where you've realized there's a thing that you need to start doing, continue doing, or stop doing that is
Mhm.
going to help you on your kind of journey.
Yeah.
Um,
I think obviously each of those moments happened in my life that I've mentioned, the situation at 12 years old, maybe another one at 18, at 30. The most recent one, and it's probably the one that's triggered a lot of the way that I'm now talking about stuff, etc. I think there's, in the past couple of years, like going through the whole IVF journey, having a child, becoming a father, seeing my business stagnate a little bit. Um, all of these things, I felt something wasn't quite right. Approaching 40 years old, like there was a huge amount of stuff that was just going on in my head at the same time that I was really, really struggling to make a huge amount of sense of, to be completely honest. Like I didn't know why I was feeling the way I was feeling. I couldn't work out why my business felt like it was a bit stagnant. I couldn't figure out why there were moments where I was having like low times and periods where I wanted to just be by myself and curl up in a ball. It was at that point, I think I then sort of decided I do need to speak to someone. And that was why I've reached out to the life coach that I have. He came recommended from, so I also have my own fitness coach who he uses this life coach therapist himself. And he said, speak to him, like he's really, really good at what he does, and have that conversation. And I think what he has helped me to do, even in the relatively short time that I've been working with him, is get back to really, and again, all of this probably comes full circle back to that little bit of identity crisis stuff. He's really, really big on and encouraged me to get crystal clear on who I am, my core values, my identity, what I want out of life, what kind of father I want to be, what kind of husband I want to be, what kind of coach I want to be. Just getting really, really clear on all of these things. And I think what that's also been helping me to do is get past this idea that this negative association with success that I've built up over the years, that he very much believes is one of the reasons that my business, for example, felt like it was stuck at a point because in my head, it's got to this level and my negative talk around it becoming more successful, in my head, I'm then thinking that that's also going to mean that I'm going to come less and less happy because that's the experience that I've had.
Yeah.
And even just having somebody sit in front of you and say that stuff to you and get you to think about things in a way that other people can't or haven't before, or maybe have tried to, but just have struggled to articulate it, whatever it might have been. And sometimes I think when people are close to you, so even if I might have had these kind of conversations with Lara, with my friends, I think when people are close to you, there's probably a fear of like rocking the apple cart. They don't necessarily want to say certain things in case it causes upset or whatever it might be. But I guess the reality of that situation is if those things aren't said, like, how much are you doing for that person? Like, it's over. Like, we understand that you don't want to cause any negative feeling or whatever it might be, but is that actually helping that person? And again, I think what Andy's sort of, spoken to me about and has got me to just think about much differently is the way that I think about certain things. Like, I was probably associating success financially with some kind of, link back to the way that, well, my dad brought up 4 kids in a nice area, in a nice house, pretty much solely on his teaching salary.
Yeah.
So, but that was 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. And I'm in my head, I'm like almost as I don't know, almost like a testament to my dad. Like I should be able to do that. I should be able to support my family on on a modest sole income because that's what my dad did for us.
Yeah.
And again, Andy's just, trying to sort of say like, but times have changed so much. Like if you really think about how much you would now need to earn, even at a very basic needs level to cover the basics, it's multiple times what your dad was earning back in the day.
Yeah.
And I'd never really, maybe I knew that kind of stuff in the back of my mind, but I'd never really been able to like make sense of it. And so I think just having somebody like him there who's he's quite straight talking, he's quite black and white about things with an understanding nature to him. But again, just very much like he's independent to my situation in many ways. So he's able to just, I'll say certain stuff to him on calls, for example, and he's just like, what, like, why is that even a worry? Like, what are you even talking about? And to have somebody just be quite firm with you in that moment suddenly makes you think, I don't actually know. Like the thing that I'm worrying about's silly or
It's staggering the amount of, I mean, this is a moment of hard relate here. Staggering the amount of energy and time that my brain spends thinking about things that my wife's like, what are you? Why? Why
yeah,
would you worry about that? And it's true. You need somebody to hold a mirror up to us. And I think the point you make there about your dad being a teacher and bringing up 4 kids. This is something that needs to be pointed out again and again and again. So my dad was a policeman. My mum was a teacher. They had 3 kids, and we had we grew up very fortunate. 4 beds, detached house. Never felt like we wanted for anything.
yeah,
But they worked in the public sector their entire careers.
yeah,
The salaries that they finished on were less than what I was earning after I'd been working for like 5-10 years,
yeah,
because that's the way that the world's gone.
yeah,
And I look at that my parents' generation now, and I think, bloody hell. I'm not saying that you had it easy. You didn't. But look at how much harder it is now.
Yeah.
How much more money you need to get in to cover the basics. And it's hard to remember that at sometimes, because you see, we talked about LinkedIn earlier, Instagram, we see people's portrayal of the perfect life, and but we don't see the truth. You don't see what's going on behind the scenes and any of that. And it's it's contributing a massive amount, I think, to people's anxiety and their mental health, especially as men who don't want to talk about this stuff typically as much as women do, who don't build the support networks of peers where they can have an honest conversation. All of these factors come into play. And you're right, having, in your case, Andy, somebody that can hold a mirror up to you and go, hang on a minute, is invaluable. And I think as friends, as brothers, as peers, we can all help our mates out, other men out, by being firm but kind.
Yeah.
And a big part of that, and I think this is a challenge, is that we need to get much better at listening properly. Because the reason why someone like Andy is invaluable to you is not because he's offering you solutions, which is what most men will naturally leap to. It's because he's just holding up a mirror and going, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Is that really worth worrying about? Or is that really the only way you could think about that?
Mm.
And if we can do that for our brothers, our peers, our colleagues, our friends, the world is going to be a much healthier place.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think like one of the things that I got more and more frustrated with myself is because that is what I do for my clients. Like
Cobbler's children.
I just couldn't do it for myself. And
no, you can't. And I'm the same. I'm the same. People who I work with tell me that I'm really good at listening. I'm really good at giving them advice, but you can't do it for yourself.
No.
It's so hard to take that to step back and have that level of emotional detachment.
Yeah.
And without kind of going, yeah, well, but that doesn't apply to me because of this, random rule that I've decided to place here.
Yeah.
It's so true. But you don't know that unless you talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it is a difficult thing. And, again, I think if you're in that kind of space, like, where your role is to help other people, I think for me anyway, it just completely heightened my frustration at myself. It almost made me, part of it probably is why it took me so long to reach out, because I think I was so intent on solving my own problems and feeling like I should be able to solve my own problems because I'm a helper of people. Like that's what I do. So why the fuck can't I help myself? And it was just,
that's the problem, because it sounds like you have done what so many guys do, and I've been guilty of doing myself. You have said, why can't I help myself? And you have interpreted that literally. You haven't gone, well, in order to help myself, what I actually need is to go and speak to somebody over here who's a specialist.
Yeah.
We do kind of go, well, let's, I can do this. I can do this. I've got this covered. No, you haven't.
Yeah.
And a fundamental difference between men and women is that if this was your wife, she's probably got a WhatsApp group with some close mates, and the first thing she would do is go, oh, I'm struggling with this at the moment. And then she'd get a flood of responses. But we don't do that.
No.
And we need to start doing it more. I mean, I'm not talking about opening up to the world and telling everybody everything, right? But just like taking that sort of leap of faith that you can have that conversation with somebody,
Yeah.
starting the ball rolling,
Yeah.
I think it's not the solution, but it's the first step towards the solution.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things, I'm pretty sure you've said it, you've probably said it on multiple podcasts, but it stuck with me a little bit was, I think you'd said, it might have been the episode where someone interviewed you actually.
Oh gosh.
And I think you said that you'd made a point at some point when somebody asked you the question of how are you were prepared to be very open and honest about your answer. And it did stick with me because I think so often that how are you question is almost seen as like a nothing question, isn't it? Like it's like a weird greeting almost. It's like, hey, how are you? And the response is going to be, I'm all right. I'm
Yeah,
not
it's a
bad.
reflex.
Good.
It's just a
Yeah.
reflex. Yeah.
So if you actually ask that question and think about the answer before you deliver it and articulate genuinely how are you feeling, the response that's going to come, the conversation that's going to follow is just going to be so different. For most people, quite freeing, I would imagine, to actually be able to honestly say, you know what, I've had a rough week this week. Really hasn't been good. My head's been in the toilet. I haven't slept, whatever it is, like just being able to have that open flow of words come out of your mouth rather than the reflective, yeah, I'm all right.
It was a game changer for me. When I did that, you're right. I have said that a lot, but I think it's one of those things that bears repeating over and over again, that by choosing to answer that question honestly, I suddenly had people responding to me positively in a very different way. It took the conversation from, and the net result of that was it moved me from a position of feeling like there was all this stuff that was happening in my head and it was only happening to me. And I was feeling incredibly isolated as a consequence of that,
Yeah.
to suddenly realizing that people who I knew quite well had been going through something themselves, or their other half had, or a sibling had, but they just hadn't talked about it. And once I'd got over my anger that people weren't talking about it,
Yeah.
I realized how powerful it can be.
Yeah.
It takes a degree of bravery to do that for the
Yeah.
first time, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But I promise you, you will be better off for doing it than if you continue to hold it in and pretend that everything is fine
Yeah.
for the outside world. Because some people, when they ask that question, they are asking it because they do genuinely want to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So take a punt that the person that's asked you the question might actually want to know the answer.
Yeah.
Because when they do, it's massive. It's
Yeah.
massive.
It also it probably goes back as well to what we were saying about if you're prepared to give that honest answer, you open the door for someone else to respond with their own stuff that they've felt they need to talk about or can't talk about, and it has that reciprocal effect, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's not, a lot of the time when I'm talking about this with people, there is a concern, like an innate concern about the burden that you are putting onto other people. The irony is that by you opening up and answering those things honestly, you are actually relieving the burden for the other person, because you're giving them the clear indication that it's okay for them to get some stuff off their chest.
Yeah.
So actually, instead of putting a burden on somebody else, you're often finding that you're sharing the burden across the two of you, and you both end up coming out of it feeling lighter.
Yeah.
But it takes that kind of conscious choice to actually do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that I get that's not easy for everybody. But if anyone's listening to this who is remotely tempted to try doing it, I just encourage you to do it, because you will only know how that starts to affect the way you're feeling and thinking and approaching these things in the future by getting that experience for yourself.
Yeah.
And I hope I haven't, in that, stolen the answer to the fifth question, Ben. I apologize if I have. Right, quickly come up with something like groundbreaking for question 5, which is, as always. So actually, no, let's reconfigure slightly. So let's sort of zero in, if you don't mind, on the whole experience that you and Lara have been through around fertility and how that felt, because I think that's the part here that is going to be really resonating with certain people. If somebody hears this, watches this chat, and is going through something similar themselves right now, based on your experience, what's the most important thing that they can do to help themselves?
Firstly, I would say just know that you're not alone, because I think in that moment, I certainly felt very much like that. Like it's hard to comprehend that anybody else is going through that same thing that you're going through, because it's happening to you in that moment. So I think I would just try and encourage someone to understand that they aren't alone, and that there are people out there who are going through or have gone through similar things, and be open to talking to them about it or talking to somebody about it. I'm not saying that that's an easy thing to do either, because I think it's also, again, maybe it is, again, a bit more of a male thing. Like, it's a very, very personal situation. Like, the specific situation that I was in just felt incredibly personal and emasculating, and all of those things that I felt about, not feeling like I was a complete man. And to then try and entertain the possibility of like speaking to people that, I don't know, again, even in that moment at that time, you're thinking like opening up to therapists just isn't something that men do. You have to try and get over that. You have to try and understand that it's going to help. It's not going to be easy to do, especially when you're so consumed by what's going on, but it will help. And so just, you know, ex- acceptance is maybe the first step, I guess, isn't it? Like, it is happening. You can try and deny that it's happening. You can try and work around it as best you want, but it is happening. So accept the fact that this is your current situation, and know that there are things you can do to improve that. And whether that is talking to someone or, those are probably the things I would just say, like, be prepared to talk.
Yeah, I that makes perfect sense, and I think that is the theme that has come through all of this chat, is that need to accept. You don't have to like it,
Mm-hmm.
but the sooner you can accept something like that, the quicker you can start to work out how you're going to deal with it.
Yeah, 100%.
And if you're going to live in denial, it's never going to help you. It's not going to help those around you. And I think maybe that's another thing, isn't it? To concern, like, just because people aren't asking you how you're doing, that doesn't mean that how you're doing doesn't matter.
Yeah, for sure.
And if this, it's not a versus the system type rant here. It's just a reminder to guys that you're an equal partner in this.
Yeah.
And just because the questions aren't being asked, it doesn't mean that you can't be struggling. It doesn't mean that you can't ask for help as well.
Yeah.
Mm.
One of the things it's actually just reminded me that what I actually did do, because again, in that moment, I think when I got that very first result that said there was nothing there, and I just completely went into my shell for like 24, 48 hours. I just didn't want to talk to anyone. I actually ended up writing Lara a letter about how I was feeling because I just couldn't. Anytime we even tried to have a conversation, I just got really upset because the emotion was just hitting me. Whereas being able to just sit with a pen and paper and write my thoughts down, I actually found very, very. Someone's trying to call me. Hang on. I actually found quite a therapeutic process to go through.
Yeah.
Also, then helped her to obviously understand what I was going through because I just physically wasn't able to express what I was going through. So that was like step one for us, I think, was me just putting pen to paper, letting her read through it, and then we were able to have a conversation afterwards.
I'm so glad that you added that at the end, Ben. That's brilliant. And I think that probably applies to so many other circumstances around how we're feeling. If saying the words isn't working for you, getting them out of your system by writing them down can be invaluable.
Yeah.
And I know, that's kind of an extreme step beyond something like journaling, but
Yeah.
that's such an important process that you've just outlined there and the practical impact of it as well. Thank you, Ben. This has been I know this conversation is going to be really, really helpful for people, and this has been enlightening for me as well. To hear you talk about this, you know, with I I don't know if you feel this, but it feels like you are talking with an awful lot of clarity.
I feel like I've got to the point. There's probably stuff in here that I don't even know that I've particularly publicly shared, and that's not to say that I want it kept secret because I don't at all. Um, I think I've just got to a point with myself, with my life, where I am clear on who I am. I'm okay with the things that have happened. Like they haven't been ideal situations, but they are my situation. They're our situation. So there's sort of no point in like dwelling on negative impact of them because it doesn't change anything. And sitting in a negative environment certainly isn't what I want to do with the rest of my life. So yeah, I think being able to express stuff, and I think also like, I mean, again, like thank you to you because I even just having the platform to talk about stuff like this helps to create that clarity, right? Because the more that you are talking about stuff, you talk stuff out of your own head. You know, I could sit here and internalize all of this and try and make sense of it, but even just being able to express it, get it out of my head, you come back with certain points and questions or dig into things a little bit further, that makes a huge difference because it lets me, I think, understand a bit clearer the thoughts and emotions and feelings that I've been through or I'm going through. Yeah, like I say, all of that just enables you to become more clear and have more clarity.
It's one of the things that I say to quite a few people. They've expressed a sense of, I guess, guilt's probably the closest word, that they've had this chat and then they've felt good off the back of it. I was like, if anyone out of this deserves to feel a bit lighter, a bit better as a result of having the chat, it's you, right? There is, if it helps the person telling the story, everyone wins, right?
Yeah.
Everyone wins. And I would, if I could go into each one of these episodes knowing that somebody was going to feel better off the back of it, I would love to be able to claim that, but I can't because everyone's on their own journey, right? But no, I'm glad that it's given you a chance to gain a little bit more clarity as well, because it's certainly going to have helped other people who have heard this to get their head around this as well. So thank you, Ben. It means a lot that you've come on today. Thank you also to everybody who has listened or watched the episode. I'm going to give you 4 things that you can do if you think this episode has been particularly helpful. So number 1 is if you know somebody who is going through similar challenges to the stuff that Ben's talked about today, you can share this episode with them, send it to them directly, give them a chance to benefit from hearing what Ben's explained today and how clearly he's kind of explained that journey and what he's learned from it. Number 2 is you can subscribe to the podcast. So it's on YouTube, it's on Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, everywhere. Subscribe away. More subscribers obviously helps us to reach more people in the future and help more people. Number 3, if there is the option to do this wherever you consume your podcasts, you can review it. I have heard it doesn't matter what you say, it's more how many stars you are willing to give out. Obviously, I'd love you to say nice things when you're reviewing it on a place like Spotify, but 5-star ratings help this to travel further, and it also helps to give us credibility for future guests in the future. And then last but by no means least, if you believe in the mission of the podcast to help destigmatize men's mental health, we've now set up a Buy Me a Coffee account. So buymeacoffee.com/goodenoughchats. I will drop the link into the description of the pod. And any money that is contributed through that is going to go towards helping fund the sort of running costs of the tools that are used to create this. So recording platform we're on, the website, etc., all of that. Any contributions there will help to offset some of that expense. This is a passion project. I will continue to do it. I will continue to record it. But as it continues to evolve, I need to invest in some tools to help make it better, more effective, more efficient. And you can now contribute to help with that. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you again, Ben. It's been awesome to chat with you. I'm very grateful for you coming on. And we'll be back again soon with another episode of Good Enough Chats. Take care.